Welcome for those who aren't Mayor Summer Youth Employment Program interns. Welcome everyone. We have been putting on a series of bike workshops throughout the summer. We have a couple more that are coming up. We have a urban cycling basics on the 18th, and that will also be in the same time slot of 12:30 to 1:30 on Tuesdays. My name is Adie Filson, and I am the Mobility Education Coordinator of the City of Cambridge. And today we have MassBike and special guests joining
friends
to talk about different types of bike culture and bike communities. With that, I'll hand it over to Galen.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Adie. Thanks, everyone in the city. Today, we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on outside of just riding around, riding to school, riding to run errands. The idea of getting out with friends and community is going to be the encouragement that we're going to be driving at today. We're going to make this relatively free-flowing conversation, so I fully encourage participation. I see that we're doing a webinar style, so the best way to jump in is through Q&A. But what I'll do is I'll prompt some questions, and hopefully folks can jump in with the Q&A that Adie and Miranda and myself can see. We're also going to be joined in a little bit by some other friends who will be joining us as well. And yeah, so I'm going to be jumping a little bit back and forth with my screen, so you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. But again, I do want to make this interactive as possible, but today we're really going to be talking about a few concepts. I guess you can see my screen here. I'm going to talk about Bay State Bike Month as a way to get everyone on board, collaborating, and jumping on with Bay State Bike Month, which is a way to track your rides, win prizes, and more. We'll talk a little bit about the Bike Life movement, which is taking place amongst youth, specifically youth of color throughout the world, really, but especially in Massachusetts. And we'll see if we can do a few minutes of a video to showcase, which actually takes place in Worcester, the 508 Bike Life crew, but there's Bike Life movements happening throughout all of Massachusetts to plug into. We'll talk a little bit about pedicabbing and parade style and just kind of keeping kind of the fun out there with business and with also more than just biking. The pedicabs really present kind of a whole way of bringing others who aren't riding into the riding culture. We have Miranda here to talk about bike polo, which is a really cool and growing sport, which is actually a worldwide sport as well. And we'll talk about bike party, which is essentially a mass ride focused on some of the joy, spontaneity, dance parties that come from biking. Now, some of these examples here are kind of more corporate level, ride to work, ride to school, track your miles, win pins type of thing. Others are very grassroots, community-led organizations, or not even really organizations, just group bike rides that spread the word through a variety of means. Some of these are sports like bike polo, and some of these started out maybe as protest movements, but have kind of morphed into parade style movements. And we'll jump in there. I'm going to take a quick pause to see if anybody can chime in with the Q&A. Have you all learned about these? And this is by no means a full list. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just a few that we decided to pick and choose to talk about today. But from the Q&A, how many of you have heard about some of these? And let me see if I can see the Q&A. I'll stop sharing for a second. And if there are any thoughts. Okay, if I know you have not heard about these. Okay, well that sounds great. So let's dive right in. Cool. And then Adie, I'll ask you to chime in as well, because I know that you have some personal participation with all of these movements as well. And Miranda, definitely talk about some of the overlap. I might bring up bike polo a little bit earlier because we have you. We're going to be talking about bike party once Laura joins around closer to 1. Cool. So let's see. I've ridden a pedicab. I'm looking at the Q&A right now. Sue says that she's new to Boston. She hasn't heard about these. And she's looking for a cycling group for people who don't wear Lycra. Yes, we're definitely going to cover that. And Katie says she has ridden in a pedicab and seen lots of new bike groups. since quarantine has started, yes. And part of the cool thing about the quarantine is that people are kind of getting cooped up out there. So the idea of let's find ways of collaborating and getting together. So the first thing I'll talk about is a little bit of Bay State Bike Month. Let me share my screen again just to give you an idea of what Bay State Bike Month looks like. So Bay State Bike Month is going to be the month of September. And what this is a way for you to track your miles to win prizes. So there'll be a way to basically log on the daily rides that you do, whether it's for commuting, whether it's for errands, whether it's for fun. And what we're going to have are competitions that are based off of where people live, maybe what schools they go to, what companies they work for, and we'll be able to offer some prizes. Typically, Bay State Bike Month has been around for, better part of more than a decade, and usually it's in May. So this year, obviously, May was totally thrown out. So we're moving it to September, so it's just around the corner. What I want you to do is think about ways that you, as riders, can coordinate challenges or competitions, friendly competitions for rides, for types of trips, and you can actually have your own challenges that you have through the Bay State Bike Month webpage, which is free and open to everybody. We're also going to be having virtual events that are going to be a general calendar. So if you wanted to actually host a webinar such as this, MassBike and Bay State Bike Month will be able to promote it to get people to come to it. So say you wanted to do a webinar on whatever it might be. Say it's riding in the rain and you wanted to just host some tips about riding in the rain. Say it's, if you're a youth worker, what does it mean to actually ride through the city of Cambridge as somebody who doesn't have a car but has to get to work, but yet necessarily feels compelled to ride their bike. So you could actually be an expert on your own and we'll bring people to you, which is also really cool. We're also going to be encouraging cities and towns to compete against each other. So if you are part of the city of Cambridge, we'll ask you basically when you sign up where you live, and we'll be able to compete Cambridge versus Somerville. So everybody who's riding in the city of Cambridge, how many miles have you ridden this week, today, this month? And we'll be able to say, hey, we're a couple 100 miles behind Somerville. Let's get out and ride and actually make ourselves as a leaderboard to be the champions that are out there. It's a really cool and fun way to engage. Yeah, one thing that's going to be changing this year is that we're not going to be doing a lot of in-person events, which makes things more challenging. All of the bike rides that we're going to be doing are going to be, of course, physically distanced and maybe encouraged to be solo rides or just small groups of people you're already kind of in quarantine with. It's going to be a challenge. In years past, we've had big bike to work days, bike to school days. We've gotten thousands and thousands of folks out riding. Unfortunately, we're going to have to pivot this year. So this might be something that we connect virtually over the website or the Facebook or other ways of locking into place over the internet. So don't be concerned that this is going to be something that just brings a bunch of people out amongst COVID. We are taking that into full consideration. And I'm going to caveat any of these bike culture and bike communities by saying that everything's up in the air right now. And a lot of the stuff might actually end up taking place in a post-COVID or as we get to further out phases. Right now, everything that we're going to mention is kind of from the past, and that if you're going to go out riding, to follow the guidelines, the protocols that the city board of health, the governor, and that all reasonable people should be following, specifically staying distanced apart and wearing masks along with helmets. Great. Cool. I want to talk a little bit about the bike life movement. So the bike life movement is, and I'm going to see if a video would play too in a second once I introduce this. So the bike life movement is essentially a youth-led movement that's taking place across the world. It's very heavy in the urban areas of Worcester and Springfield and Boston and Lowell, specifically in Massachusetts, but bike life is actually taking place across the world. It's a pretty cool movement. Arguably, I'm not a part of it because I'm not a youth. Specifically, I don't do wheelies on those wheelie bikes like these riders do, but this is completely self-organized, but they have collective aggregates. And by that, I mean just organizations that pop up based off youth leaders. It's a really cool movement because it is a way for community members to form groups, to form leadership roles, and to press also for bike advocacy. You may have seen these these packs of rides riding around Boston, around downtown Crossing, a little bit into Cambridge, but specifically in the Roxbury, Dorchester area. And the idea is that once a month, typically in the on-season, what you get is New England Bike Life is the Boston version, 508 Bike Life is the Worcester version, and 413 Bike Life, it's kind of based off the area codes. And if you identify with being a youth, specifically a youth of color, I would highly encourage you to reach out to some of the Bike Life crew. They're very active on Facebook, on Instagram, mainly Instagram as well. And just looking up Bike Life in your local area to find out what's going on. We just had a ride 2 weeks ago. I did get to tag along with it. I know Maurice, who's the guy in red in the front. Maurice is kind of one of the organizers to make sure that this is kind of notified to the city, because a giant pack of riders typically turn some heads. So this is not necessarily something that's going to be city-led. Again, this is citizen-led. So there are some nuances to take into consideration there. Where with Bay State Bike Month, this is very official. We used to have the Department of Transportation chime in. We used to have the cities and the municipalities chime in. So this was like a very top-down led movement. The Bike Life is a very grassroots led up movement, which is also really cool. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the grassroots stuff going on when we talk about the bike party. But I wonder, Adi, if we can just take a second. I'm going to see if my video will play. And if not, we can just put it into the chat and encourage folks to check it on the YouTube in a second. But I'm going to ask for like a little bit of 30 seconds of stalling while I see if I can switch my screen. So feel free to chime in, especially if there are any questions that are popping up already.
Cool. It did look like we have a question. How do I measure my miles? Will my phone do this, or do you work it out yourself?
Great question. So it's going to be multiple ways. And I actually fully expect this to be launched and starting to spread the word by the end of this week. But for Bike Month, it'll be self-reported. So you can go to the website and you could say, I rode X amount of miles today. And then you could say, is it for an errand? Is it for commuting? Is it for fun? And we're going to get data from riders from across the state. We also can connect to Strava. And Strava is a ride tracking app that actually tracks your start to finish. So you'll get mileage set in there, which is also really cool. So you can connect directly to Strava, another one called Map My Ride, and another app called I Love to Ride. So we have different ways of connecting in with the platform. We're still working on the platform, which is why we haven't released it yet, but I'm expecting that we're going to have something to start to play around with as soon as the end of this week or early next, knowing that starting in September, once you start to track your miles, you'll be able to see how other people are tracking their miles, and you'll be able to kind of network in between each other. Of course, if it's self-reported, people are going to fib a little bit and they might exaggerate some of their miles. We're expecting that. It's not that big of a deal. Again, this is, not for money. It's just for credibility. So if you need to be worried about lying about your miles, that's its own story right there. But the idea is just to get out and ride for encouragement, and also to have employers. So say you're the city of Cambridge, and have a bunch of employees for the summer, which is the case right now. I'm going to try to get the city to encourage all of their riders to ride as much as they can in the month of September, so that the city of Cambridge, as an employer, might be able to compete against another equally sized employer like Biogen or a gardening store or whomever. It doesn't really matter as long as people are riding. The beauty of riding bikes is that everybody can ride. And so when we go through the different examples today, you can find a group and a community that you identify with, and I guarantee you there's a riding group attached to it. So we're going to talk about just scratching the surface of some of the clubs that are out there, just to give you a taste. Some are top down, some are bottom up. Some are youth, some are older, some are white, some are brown. Doesn't really matter. Whatever you're connected with, there will be a riding club for you. And the cool thing about the Boston, Camberville, Massachusetts area is that everybody's pretty inclusive. And if you're coming new to a group, especially if you're new to the area, guarantee you're going to find some bike buddies of folks who are going to be wanting to show you the ropes to show you how their community operates, which is also really cool as well. I'm going to do a few minutes of this to give you an example. And a little bit of a preface. This documentary is 11 minutes long. We'll share the link to it. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a youth rider. The bike life scene in this documentary is specifically about how the youth and law enforcement are interacting in the Worcester community. So this is actually an advocacy video. This is geared around some of the conflicts that are taking place on the streets. This is from about 4 years ago. So we've actually been able to work with the police departments, with the city of Worcester, and with the Bike Life crew to kind of normalize and make it so that some of those conflicts are less. But just so you know, about 4 years ago, there was a lot of conflict between police officers and the Bike Life crew, mainly because, unfortunately, when packs of riders ride through the city, it turns a lot of heads, and sometimes those heads called up law enforcement and conflicts ensued. But this is a good example of a youth-led movement which started out as a protest movement. And I think what we're seeing, especially this season, is that there's a new take on protests right now, which are becoming a little bit more socially acceptable, where there's less conflicts, at least in the Boston area, around some of the protest movements that are going on. So this documentary focuses on the conflict because it's a documentary with advocacy in mind, but I'm showing it because the riders themselves are the focus of it. And if you were to participate in a Bike Life ride these days, like if you were to have joined us 2 weeks ago, there was zero conflict. Police officers who were nearby actually helped block intersections so the riders could actually pass through more safely. And conflicts have been tampered down. But I just want to showcase this to give you a taste of some of the culture that is going on, specifically youth of color in urban areas. And the reason I'm presenting this documentary is because the leaders of Bike Life who were supposed to join or were hoping to join today couldn't make it because they had work. It's hard to join in the middle of the day for a lot of folks. So just want to preface that too, is that, again, we're not representing, we're just showcasing some of the work that's already taking place out there.
It started around December 16. That's when people started they say, "Yo, just pop out." Everybody from every area started coming together. We met up at City Hall. That's where the middle is. Call it the heart. It's the center of the city, the border of the south, east, north, and west side, all that. Mind you, we had mountain bikes with bent rims, barely brakes, handlebars bent, but they just grabbed it and come out. Just have fun, enjoy it. Do our thing from there, we ride out.
Worcester police say they've received complaints from several neighborhoods and they're not taking the issue lightly.
Inmates were arrested already, hopefully able to confiscate some of these bikes.
Anyone caught swerving could be charged with disturbing the peace or disorderly conduct.
Me and my friend, we were at the top of an empty parking garage, and we were just doing wheelies, and one cop came up and arrested us. And he pulled out his weapon. He said, "Get on the wall." And we said, "For what?" And then he pulled out his weapon to hit us with it, and then we just got on the wall. Someone called it in saying we were stealing cars, but we were just in the top of the parking garage just doing wheelies. Sometimes we just feel like the cops are against us, but all the people in the city are against us too.
We're not asking for much. We just want our own spot to ride where we won't get kicked out of, and more bike lanes we could ride in, and for the police to stop harassing us.
We don't bring no violence. We just keep to each other and just ride bikes together and just have fun.
The city of Worcester and the police are going to continue to harass us, but we're not going to stop until our voices are heard and understood.
But that's a taste of some of the bike life culture that's going on. Again, this is a documentary about the conflicts between the police, and we were actually able to use this documentary to help us understand how to engage with the police officers, with the youth voices, which has actually been really helpful. But getting back to the point of what's going on in Boston, let me go back to this slide here. To check out what Bike Life is, you'll see that in this photo, which is just from 2 weeks ago, it was very friendly, and obviously the interactions in Worcester are different than the interactions in Roxbury and Dorchester and Boston. We've built a movement, not just with Bike Life, but with Bike Party, with an organization that used to be around called Critical Mass, where it started out kind of as a conflict, and then it actually has become more of a cultural movement. And the cool thing about Bike Life is that you got a little bit of a taste there from that last clip. These riders are incredibly skilled riders, and they actually champion themselves on wheeling and being able to maneuver back on a wheel. So it's a style of riding which is actually becoming similar to what BMX riding was when it started out, kind of a subculture, which is then becoming more and more mainstream. So I guarantee if you start to ride around the city of Boston, city of Cambridge, every so often you'll see a big pack of mainly youth who are doing wheelies around, and it's amazing to see that these riders have such skill that they can go literally miles and miles doing these wheelies throughout. Now, I will want to do the caveat again that this is not sanctioned by the cities, because there is no real safe space to do this out in public except at a skate park. So what we do as leaders of bicycling movements is to try to work with the cities to say that this is actually a safe and an outlet for riders who otherwise feel pressures of an urban environment. And the best part about what I like about the 508 Worcester crew is that their motto is wheels up, guns down. So it is kind of like an anti-gang and an anti-violence movement. And that's one way to look at it there. Cool. I'm going to take a quick pause because I know we just went from like one extreme of Bike Month to another extreme of Bike Life, but to see if there are any thoughts or any comments that have popped up since. Cool.
Is it connected with Bike Month?
Yeah, we're probably going to be doing some Bike Month activities with Bike Life. So the idea of Bike Month is, though it's centralized in terms of where MassBike hosts the website, the events themselves are very much decentralized. So as long as an event is open to everybody for the most part and is free, there might be some levels of skill. So if you want to be a long distance rider, you have to have that kind of skill and that kind of bike. But the idea of Bike Month is if it's an event that you're offering, we're happy to promote it and host it. So connected, yes, in terms of we're going to start promoting it. So if you do lock in with Bike Month, hey Laura, if you do lock in with Bike Month, you'll hear about things like Bike Life, Bike Polo, and Bike Party just the same. Cool. All right. And now for something completely different, I might pass it over to Miranda to talk a little bit about Bike Polo.
Sure. Hi. Hello. I'm going to watch the rest of that video. I don't know very much about Bike Life. I wish I was paying more attention. I was trying to get my documents in order here. But that was cool. I learned a lot. Thanks, Galen. So Bike Polo is a sport that we play on bikes. It's kind of like most similar, I think, to horse polo or maybe elephant polo. I don't know. But it's on bikes. So we play on a tennis court or a street hockey court, and it's 3 versus 3. People ride single speed bikes, and then they have a mallet, as you can see here, and it's a street hockey ball. And that's really about it. There are some more technical rules, but honestly not a ton. You are trying to score into the goal. The biggest thing is that you can't put your feet down on the ground. A lot of the skill involved sort of is being able to turn sharply and like maneuver around other people without falling off your bike. If you do put your feet on the ground, then you have to sort of remove yourself from the play and go to half court and tap in. You have to hit your mallet on the wall to get back in. I can nerd out and talk about this forever, so I'm trying to keep it succinct. This is what
Remember,
it looks like.
if anyone has questions about either the rules or anything related to it, feel free to write it in the Q&A, and Miranda can answer as we go.
Yeah, I would love that. I just put in some random things about what it's like. So let me know, maybe 80. I think something just popped up, but it's a little hard to see it while screen sharing. So
What are the rules?
I'm sorry, what?
We have a question. What are the rules?
Oh, well, the biggest rule, like I said, is you can't put your feet on the ground. The other main thing is that you can only score from a shot with the end of your mallet. So the end is sort of like it's like a can shape, if you will, and it only counts as a goal if you hit it as a shot. If you sort of like shove it in or shuffle it, that doesn't count. That's a hot that comes up a lot. You can't sort of intentionally make people fall over. There are crashes occasionally. I think probably not as often as one might think, but you can't do it on purpose. In pickup, it's like a little bit slower. When we actually play tournaments, there's systems of like penalties and turnovers, and there's a ref, but sometimes it gets a little bit of a shoulder, but once somebody falls off their bike, then it's not allowed. Trying to think what the other rules are. I think that's basically it.
Someone's asking, how long do the games last?
So there's sort of like, it's the whole thing mostly exists as like pickup. So it's cool to give presentations like this, I think, because it's a pretty accessible sport in some ways. I think it's not in equipment, but it is because we play pickup twice a week usually. Right now it's a little bit on hold, but anyone can show up, and we have some loaner equipment. And when we're playing pickup, those games usually are like, we just play till 5 points. Sometimes we time them if we have a lot of people, and it's usually like 15 or 18 minutes. If you're playing at a really competitive level, they'll be timed 10 or 15-minute games. Yeah.
So where would I go to either participate or to watch bike polo?
Let me tell you. I have a bunch of, hold on, let me click all the way through to the end. So the two places we play are Smithfield, which is near the Harvard Stadium in Lower Alston. That's a brand new, like redesigned park playground. It's very nice. There's a skate park there if you all are familiar. And then the other place we play is Corporal Burns Playground, which actually is in the city of Cambridge, so fitting for today. We sort of cycle between those two courts because we share them with street hockey players. This one at Smith is a street hockey court. So you will have to follow us on Facebook, or probably Facebook, our group, or get in touch with me or someone if you want to know exactly where. Should I continue? I have a few more things that I was going to mention.
Sure.
All right, let me go back. So this is bike polo. That's me in the cold weather. Some people wear a lot of protective gear, helmets, gloves, knee pads sometimes. This is Corporal Burns Playground in Cambridge, where we play sometimes. Something that's really fun about bike polo is that it is kind of a small community, but also a really international community. A lot of cities, large and small, in the US have a club, and a lot of large cities around the world have clubs. And so it's really fun. A club will just decide that they want to throw a tournament, and you get a team together. It's only 3 people, so you just grab 2 friends, register online. A lot of times clubs will host people, and you can stay at their house, and then there will be, it's usually 2 days, and the first day is rounds or something, and the second day is a bracket, and then you win trophies. This is a tournament we had in Alston at Smithfield. This is someone who flew out from Portland, someone from New York City, and someone from Boston. That was the winning team last October. This was a tournament in Newport, Rhode Island. Usually we travel a lot. We can't right now, obviously, but this was in February. A bunch of people from our club went to San Juan, Puerto Rico to play. So this is us at the airport in Puerto Rico with our bikes in bags. And then this is me trying to put my bike together in the middle of the night before playing the next day. Those are some more pictures. It's a very fun tournament. We're always trying to go because it's February. It's a good time to leave the weather in Boston. These are some other photos that I just snagged from my Instagram really quick. This past year, I went to a tournament in DC, a tournament in Asheville, North Carolina. This was a Boston team that won a tournament in Rhode Island, and then a little over a year ago, I also went to a tournament in London, which was very cool. So that's all. Those are the places we play. I need to grab my laptop cord. Give me just a moment.
Miranda, can I play a quick news clip about bike polo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was looking for a video. There aren't any current ones, unfortunately, but I think I know the one from
I think I found it. If you're okay with me showing it.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, give me a sec. I'm sorry to take over, but it's really cool. This is from Fox News from a little while ago. Let me see if can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Well, when you think of polo, the sport, you think exclusive private clubs, royalty, riding around on horses. But have you ever heard of bicycle polo?
I never had. Have you?
No.
Well, the game is played in 30 countries across the globe, apparently, including right here in Boston. WBZ photojournalist Mike Townsend takes us to Alston for a look at cycling's best kept secret.
3, 2, 1, polo! Polo, but it's on bicycles. It's actually, in some form, existed for a pretty long time. In the early 1900s, it was actually a presentation sport at an early Olympics. Take. You can push. But in its current form, hard court bike polo, where we play on a rink within walls, was invented in Seattle about 25 years ago. A bunch of bicycle messengers were hanging around in between doing jobs, and they started playing polo, and then since then, it's sort of evolved into what it is now. Good stop. Keep it safe. In Boston, there's one club, and our club has, probably 20 to 25 permanent members.
I discovered this about 3 years ago. I was into bike racing at the time. One of the kids here, Mars, introduced me to this, and I don't know, it caught a bug for it, I guess. Good idea. No, it's like anything, it's not easy at first, but once you start to you see something cool, you want to replicate it, you want to do a trick or something like that, it gets you back out here. Ooh. I haven't had anything that's kept me off the bike happen yet, but it's just a lot of bumps and bruises.
You can ride a bike, you can hit a ball with a stick, you can do it. It's just a matter of getting out there and feeling confident to try it. Men, women, transgender, it's a super open sport, very inclusive. Let anybody come out and play.
Right to the net.
And we encourage anybody to come out and play.
Yeah, buddy! Good shot, Tate.
That's fun. I can ride a bike and hit a ball with a stick, but I could not do that.
I could do it with training wheels. Training wheels.
I would hurt myself.
Okay.
Thank you, Galen.
Yeah, thanks for letting me take over. That was great.
It looks like we have a couple more questions. Sorry, Adi, what were you gonna say?
So we have a couple of questions. Is there an age requirement? Do you know of any clubs on the West Coast? And have you ever won a tournament?
Wow, okay, good questions. No age requirement. I think that's something that's cool about it. I think it would be great if we had more young people involved. I don't know how to get more people involved. Hopefully things like this. I think it's cool because there's no age requirements, and it's also fully co-ed. So even tournaments at an international level, sometimes they're mandatory co-ed teams, which I think is pretty sweet. There's no separate men's and women's leagues. Any clubs on the West Coast? Hi, Chris. I don't actually know I think there's a pretty good club in Los Angeles. There's 2 in the Bay. There's one in San Francisco, one in Oakland. Seattle has a huge club. Portland, Oregon has a huge club. I think there might there's a big club in Fresno, California. There's a couple like sort of unsuspecting smaller cities that are pretty active. I have never won a tournament. I'm working on it. I've only been playing for about 2 years, and some of these people have a lot more time in. So, last question: are certain bikes better than others for playing? People get very into it once it gets a little bit more competitive, and they'll have whole like custom frames built and special setups, but usually it's a single speed bike, something that you're comfortable on. We make a lot of adjustments so that it is maneuverable. But if you want to just try it, if you want to just come out, we have a lot of bikes that we can lend to people, and if you just want to see how it feels, you can bring your own. Yeah. We should let Laura, we're running out of time here. I feel like I've been talking forever.
That was awesome, Miranda. I love bike polo. I live just down the block from the bike polo court, and so even as a spectator, it's really fun to just hang out and kind of watch the action go. So it's good to see out, and I'm longing for the day when we can all get back together and play polo. Of course, it's gonna have to be a post-COVID thing. So, but we're getting close. We're getting close. Let's introduce Laura. We have Laura Gillian who joined us. Sorry, she had a little work conflict, so she was able to join us a little late. But Laura is one of the leaders of Bike Party. Laura, do you have slides to share, or should I grab a couple of photos?
I just went to the Facebook page and found a cool video, so I'm going to start there.
Take it away.
So let me just share my screen, and then I'll talk over it because there's not a lot of sound for it. It just looks really cool, and I'll tell you about Bike Party. There we go. Put this in full screen mode. All right. So, Bike Party is exactly what it sounds like. It's a ride, a little mini party on wheels, happens once a month in pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID times, happens once a month, generally has a theme. We have lots of music and music trailers, and we take you on a slow roll throughout the city of Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, surrounding areas, everything mostly like in and around downtown. But the big thing for me that I really like doing is taking people somewhere new. I know I learned a lot of ins and outs and cool places about the city from Bike Party, including places like Ink Block under 93 is very cool, lots of really neat murals, and it's just a really intriguing space that was created under a highway, and I never would have found it without Bike Party. So that was really important to me. So you can kind of see I'm one of the literal leaders. I ride out front, hauling the music trailer, bringing people through all these places, and we get a couple hundred people depending on the time of year. Summers, it can be upwards of 6 or 7. Winter, it could be anywhere from 50 to 200, depending how warm it is that day. But yeah, year-round, monthly party on wheels, little party and dance stops in between. So it's just a fun way to get people out and about on their bicycles and, you know, get people to socialize, get to meet more people who like riding bikes. But the thing I wanted to talk about today is that Bike Party goes beyond just these monthly rides. So something that happened, especially as, you know, we ran into this pandemic, was that we wanted to make sure that there was still a community for people to talk about bikes, to find other people who like biking. We have this bike boom going on right now where like places are selling out of bikes. There's more people on bikes than ever. So we still wanted to create a community for people to discuss our favorite activity. So there's the Bike Party community, Boston Bike Party community page, where people can go and post and ask questions and get answers from the community. We have things like the Tag and Brag, where someone takes a photo of an interesting place, mural, architecture, whatever it is, with your bike in front, and then someone else has to find that same photo, recreate the same photo, and then take another photo somewhere else, and then it keeps going as, you know, a game of tag. Someone has to find the next one, so on and so forth. There's a marketplace for people to sell things. So yeah, we've kind of tried to cultivate this whole online community to keep the community engaged when we can't have these monthly rides, because, you know, they're fun and they're awesome, but it was a decision that myself and other leaders made that this wasn't the right time to have an event where we had so many people getting together, and it's not as much fun if you can't party together and hug your friends that you haven't seen in a while. And so that was a decision that was made. And then the other video that I wanted to show you was another thing that Bike Party ended up picking up with everything that was happening in the community. Give me 1 second. You can watch me navigate this Facebook page, which is always fun for everybody. Oh, I go back one more. Oh, you don't need to see my private Facebook page. Hold on a second. But I'll talk through it as I'm looking for this video. But basically, cycling is not immune to the issues that are happening in the world around race. You know, this whole continued movement around Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening. We wanted to make sure that as a platform, we were making sure that everybody's voices were being heard, that all of our biking community members felt seen and cared for. So something that ended up springing up in conjunction with all of this happening was a new ride that Bike Party ended up being part of, which is called the Ride for Black Lives, which I'm wearing a little t-shirt right now, which was designed by the awesome Alex Joachim. I am not 100% sure how to say his last name. I'm so sorry, Alex. But the design is really cool. And it started as just one ride. We were going to do this one ride, and we were going to, you know, ride around, express that Black Lives Matter, express that the community cares. And what it turned into was more of a movement. So the first ride, apologies for my dry throat. The first ride was put on by Bike Party, but it has now become its own ride that we just support. So if you're looking for something to do and something to be involved in, it is not a party on wheels. It is not our standard bike rides, but it is a chance to get out on your bike and support the community and support the people around you. Here we go. I'll play the short video for you, which was a recap of the first ride. So that's Greg Hom, one of our co-founders. So as you're watching this video, one thing that was really important was to still have the vibe of Bike Party and the feeling of Bike Party as we were doing this event. So you can see kids, you can see all the different types of people came out for this ride. So it was really important to us to make sure that we were involved in that. I'm so sorry, I don't know what's happening with my voice right now. But, you know, when you think about biking, sometimes it's hard, especially when we're stuck at home and you feel like you can't be involved in anything. So just keep an eye out in your community, find other ways to support things that are happening through Bike Polo, through everything. But that was an important thing for Bike Party to be a part of. And I will stop talking now because I'm out of water. Sorry about that. But if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Cool. Laura, thank you so much. And it's cool to talk about the intersectionality of the community organizing and then in the social movements that are taking place right now too. It's very important to recognize that biking, especially bike culture, is not a single silo. And a person can participate in Bike Polo, they can participate in Bike Life, they can participate in Bike Party. and that there's cross intersectionality going on. So just because we're talking about different factions and facets of this awesome gem of bike culture that's out there, and of course, we're by no means getting anywhere close to all the different rides that are going on out there. Just to know
True.
that there's a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I love watching bike polo, and I love going to the BMX track there too with my nephew.
Oh.
I'm gonna stop talking now. I don't know what's happening.
Must be the pollen in the air. Yeah, and I can talk very, very briefly about one more topic that I know wanted to come up, which was bike polo. Not bike polo, pedicabbing. This is just going to be a very quick one, just to showcase a little bit of what's going on, just to share a couple of slides here. Pedicabbing is basically an employment of riding around tourists on tricycles. Of course, this is all on hold for COVID, so there is no employment going on through tricycles. But the cool thing about pedicabs is that it goes beyond just riding around tourists to Fenway Park, but it actually kind of builds in the community around it. So just a couple of examples of the way that pedicabbing has expanded to build a community. I don't necessarily recommend that anybody who wants to just ride a bicycle would want to go and work for a pedicab company. It's actually really challenging. It's really hard work. It's not necessarily the most profitable or rewarding, but the beauty is that it does build a community and culture around it. So just a couple of examples, like on the bottom left, the pedicab crew did a charity bike ride for multiple sclerosis, and they rode pedicabs from Boston all the way to Provincetown on the edge of the Cape, which was a real community bonding experience. At the top, you'll see Tristan, who's riding around the mascots for the Bruins and for the Patriots. So it's a little bit more than just tourists. It really is kind of a community promotion. And at the bottom right, you'll see a bunch of Stop and Shop bags on a pedicab. And what was going on there was part of the mutual aid network for delivering food during COVID. So food bags for a week's worth of groceries were being dropped off at senior centers for people who were homebound. And this was done through the pedicab, through the tricycle. And the beauty of a pedicab is that it is legal in the streets of Boston, Cambridge, around, but it's still pedal powered, but it's large enough that you can carry people. You can almost see in that top right photo about 4 people within the pedicab being pedaled by a single person. But then also it can be used for doing cargo. So you can carry things like a week's worth of groceries for 10 people, but you don't necessarily need a car to do so. And the beauty of the pedicab culture is that it does give back. So there's a little bit of community giving. So it's not just about getting money from tourists to pay your bills. It's also about how can that skill set of being able to use your legs to pedal a bunch of weight go towards charity, go towards supporting the community through mutual aid, and go through things that you might not even really think that pedicabs should be able to do, like ride all the way to Cape Cod and to Provincetown. Just an example of ways of getting out of the bubble. So finding a work employment through the bicycle and then expanding that so you can actually have some real impact throughout the community. There's a lot more that we could talk about too. There's critical masses and youth-oriented like community rides, which are great for educational purposes. And I know the City of Cambridge and MassBike do a lot of collaborations. When COVID tampers down a bit, we're going to be doing a lot of on-bike training for youth. Maybe we'll bring together a critical mass, which is a take on critical mass, where it's just a bunch of kids taking over the streets, similar to Bike Party, but it's really fun. We're thinking about a bike to school bus so that you don't need to actually take the big yellow buses, or you don't need to get dropped off by your parents to go to school. So there are other ways of building the community with a youth-oriented mindset as well. So this is a way that you might be able to plug into your biking community too, where, hey, I just want to start an organization that teaches kids how to do hand signals. You work with a local community center, you work with a local housing development, you work with a local school, and you can build out some youth programming as well. So the point of what we're trying to get at today, talking about all the varieties, there's youth-led, there's adult-led, there's top-down, there's totally grassroots, there's some protest conversation, there's some youth empowerment conversation, there's just sport, but a lot of this stuff does mix up. And the cool part about having my panelists, and I want to thank, of course, Miranda, Laura, and Edie for having us, is that we all do this work collectively. Laura, you were a pedicabber for a while. I love to sit in on the bike polo. We've all taught kids how to ride bikes and done essentially critical masses. We participate in Bike Party. We participate in the Ride for Black Lives. Full disclosure, I don't do wheelies, so I don't usually do the bike life, but I did jump in a couple of times this past year. But I will also say that some of this stuff is on hold because of COVID, so you won't see a lot of this stuff actually in action yet. So getting back to the Bike Month conversation, if we stay tuned to what's going on with Bike Month, Bay State Bike Month through MassBike, we're going to have as many and as much virtual and solo rides or small group rides or whatever we're comfortable with on a public health level getting out there, so that we're forming our own movements. And I don't want you to think that you have to build something, join something that's already built. I would also encourage you to start something. Laura, you helped found a bike party, right? For instance, and without these kind of building blocks of you going out and being a leader, you're going to inspire other movements to take place. And now Ride for Black Lives can kind of springboard off of a bike party movement. So the idea of what we're trying to get at here is there's so many different spirals in the bike culture. And this was just a taste. So hopefully this was inspiring. And I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes. I realize we're at time, so I'll give it back to you, Adi. But if there are any more questions, please, 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 we're here for you.
Yeah, feel free to use the Q&A box for questions. In the meantime, I'm gonna prompt you with another question, Galen. How do I find out about other types of bike cultures? What are the avenues for that?
Good question. For Facebook users, there's a really robust Facebook community in the Boston area. There was a page called Boston Area Bike Events. There's a couple of kind of, I know we talk about intersectionality, but it's also very important for spaces to also have their own demographics. So for those of you who are women, trans or femme based, there's Femme Mechanics, which is kind of a female-oriented organization that does mechanic work, but then also has a bunch of different rides and communities, which I know that you three are also a part of. So there's like overnight rides and other ways of combining, and arguably I don't participate, but that's just because my own gender recognition. But Facebook is a good way to connect with some of those. Hopefully Bay State Bike Month will be kind of the collection to get people to network. But I would also just kind of say connect in with local bike organizations. Like Cambridge has Cambridge Bike Safety, which has a lot of different advocacy-minded folks, but that are also connected to group rides. And the city of Cambridge does, when we're back in real time, in the after times, we're gonna have some pretty robust group rides like the Bow Tie Ride, where hundreds and hundreds of different riders of Cambridge will get together. And really it's about kind of just showing up and talking to people. But I don't know if I have like a one direct answer for you, besides like, do your best to sleuth around on the internet, namely on Facebook, because that's a big event-based platform, and then to go to a local advocacy organization and see if you could just find somebody. People love to talk about biking. People love to introduce new riders to riding. So feel that you will find buddies, but it may take a little bit of just asking around. And I might also say that, Adi, you're a great resource. So if folks reach out to the Cambridge Community Development Department, I know that you know ways of plugging in with direct people.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. So if folks want any more information on any of these bike communities or ways that you could connect with some bike communities, feel free to email me. My email is afilson, and that's PHILSON @cambridgema.gov. And I'm happy to connect you with Galen, Miranda, or Laura, and or feel free to reach out to each of them. Thank you all for joining us today.